Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen. We are at session 7 of our series of lectures. In our last lecture, we discussed sources of literature. After identifying your sources of literature, you collect the literature that are relevant to your research, and then the next logical step is to review the literature. So this session discusses literature review. And after completing the session, I expect that you'll be able to explain what literature review means, identify the various types of literature reviews and the sources of information, and then identify the reasons for which literature reviews are conducted, and then also be able to provide relevant citations and references for the literature reviewed. We shall concern ourselves with two things in this lecture. The first is literature review itself, and then the types of literature review. These are your usual references. Read these alongside with the lecture notes I have provided. So what is literature review? Let's give one comprehensive definition, which is that a literature review surveys scientific articles, books, medical journals, dissertations, and other sources relevant to a particular issue or area of research or theory, providing description, summary, and critical evaluation of each work. So what you do when you are reviewing literature is that you assemble all the literature relevant to your research and then read through them, pick out the essential points that you need, and then make comparisons. We shall look at these in detail. Literature review serves certain goals or purposes. Newman identifies 5 of these, which are: 1, they demonstrate a familiarity with the body of knowledge and establish credibility. They show you the path of prior research and how current research is linked to it. And then they also help to integrate and summarize what you know in the area, and then to learn from others and stimulate new ideas. Now, literature review has a few purposes. They place one's original work, in case of these thesis and dissertation, in the context of existing literature. What we are saying here is that your work is placed in the context of what other people have done. It helps you also to describe the relationship of each work to what you are investigating. And then, more importantly, it helps you to identify ways to interpret and shed light on any gaps in previous research. Types of literature review. Newman, again, has identified a few types of literature review, which are the following. First, we have what we call the self-study review. This type of review increases the researcher's confidence. It is a combination of goal 1 and goal 4. If you remember, we said goal 1 is to demonstrate familiarity with the body of knowledge and establish credibility, and goal 4 is to learn from others and stimulate new ideas. In goal 1, we noted that a good literature review increases a researcher's confidence in the researcher's professional confidence, and also the researcher can benefit from the efforts of others as stated in goal 4. Now the next type is what we call context review. This type places a specific project in a big picture. The most common goal of writing a literature review or this type of literature review is creating links to a developing body of knowledge. This is background or context review. It usually appears at the beginning of a report or an article. It tells the reader how the literature project fits into the big picture and its implications for a field of knowledge. Now, historical reviews. Simply, historical reviews show the path of prior research and how current project is linked to it. Theoretical review. This type of review compares how different theories address an issue. This type of review also follows the third goal, which talks about integrating and summarizing what is known in an area or in a discipline. In doing this, we interpret, we present different theories that claim to explain the same thing. And then we have methodological reviews, which point out how methodologies vary by study. This type of literature review focuses more on the literature designs, sample, measures adopted or used in different researches. Types of literature. We have already seen these in the previous lecture. We have seen journals as a credible source of information for research. Journals can come in two forms. They can be refereed or non-refereed journals. We also looked at books. We also looked at conference proceedings, and we stated how these useful can be in providing latest information for research. And then we also looked at government and corporate reports, theses and dissertations. And what we didn't look at in the previous lesson is the internet, which is the fastest growing source of information in this day and age. Now, it is important that you assess every piece of information that you source and copy. Now, in doing this, you have to follow the following steps. First, be careful about the provenance. Provenance means the source. That is, who are the authors and what are their credentials? You know, are the author's argument supported by evidence? These are questions you need to ask. Is it a case study? Are they narrative? Do they present statistic information? Or are the findings very recent? These are questions that you need to ask yourself in order to establish credibility of a source. You also consider objectivity. And these are the questions that you need to ask. Is the author's perspective even-handed or prejudicial? That is it one-sided? Is contrary data considered? That is, does the author consider other views or perspectives? Or is certain pertinent information ignored to prove the author's point? Now, it is up to you to be able to judge, to determine whether, a paper is objective or not from these questions. Yeah, the other thing to consider is persuasiveness. What we are trying to say here is what the author have written. Do these convince you enough, or the author's argument convincing enough? If they are, you can decide to use the source, or you can decide to reject the source. And then finally, you look at the value of the article. Does the work ultimately contribute in any significant way to an understanding of the subject of your research? All these put together can help you identify the relevant sources and decipher the good ones from the bad. Now, having looked at the types of literature and the sources, there are other considerations. And information comes from two main sources. The other considerations you have to look at is that information comes from two main sources. One, primary source, the second, secondary, and then the other, tertiary. Now, your lectures in information sources will explain this in greater details. What are primary sources? Primary sources provide first-hand information in the original words of the creator or an eyewitness. They are original materials that have not been filtered through interpretation. Now, according to Newman, primary sources may be found in the archives, that is a place where documents are stored, in private collections, in family closets, or in museums. Published and unpublished written documents are the most important types of primary sources. Examples of primary sources include the following. We have diaries, we have memoirs or autobiographies, interviews, personal interviews, telephone interviews or email interviews, letters, original document, patents, and all that. All these are examples of primary sources. Note that primary sources carry information which have not been published. These are examples of secondary sources. Bibliographies, commentaries, dissertations, indices, abstracts and bibliographies, journal articles, and monographs. And tertiary sources consist of information which is a distillation and collection of primary and secondary sources. Examples are the almanac, encyclopedia, fact books, textbooks, dictionaries, and atlases. Ladies and gentlemen, pretty soon we have come to the end of yet another session. Read this session together with the previous one, and as I have told you, read your lecture notes on these sessions alongside the textbooks I have prescribed. Thank you for listening. We shall meet the next time.